I'm Stella, 34 years old, living in a coastal town, about a 40-minute drive from downtown San Diego. Every morning, I make myself a strong cappuccino, listen to the news on the radio, then take a leisurely walk to our company's headquarters just 2 blocks from my home. I'm the co-founder of a healthcare biotech startup, a job most outsiders can hardly picture, especially those who think office work just means sitting and typing all day. My family has never truly understood what I do, or maybe they never cared to. In their eyes, I've always been the odd youngest daughter, dressing simply, rarely wearing makeup, and usually seen with a laptop in hand, or buried in online meetings. Olivia, my older sister, by 4 years, has always been the pride of the family, graceful, charming, and knowing exactly how to please people. On Thanksgiving or Christmas, the whole extended family would crowd around Olivia, throwing out familiar praises. Olivia, that dress looks perfect on you. I heard your husband just got promoted. That's amazing. And me, if anyone remembered I existed, the only thing they'd say was, "Oh, Stella, she's doing something in high-tech healthcare, I think." Their tone was always light, like a tiny footnote at the bottom of the page no one bothers to read carefully. I used to believe that if I worked hard enough quietly carrying the heavy load behind the scenes one day, my parents would look at me with the same pride they showed Olivia. But after all these years, that recognition never came. All the praise, the attention, the expectations, they were always hers. As for me, they often said I was hard to approach, dry and quiet. They didn't know or didn't want to know that I once stayed in the office past midnight to handle a crisis in a public health project worth nearly $3 million. They never asked how I felt building a company from the ground up with 3 college friends. If someone asked me about my family, I'd just give a short smile and say we don't keep in touch much. Not because I wanted to hide anything, but because there's simply nothing left to say. For more than 2 years, there have been no texts, no calls, no birthday cards. The gap between us has become a clean break no one bothers to repair. Still, I kept sending money to my parents every month, covering electricity, water, internet, even cable. On average, about $4,800 a month, not including extras like when my mom said the fridge broke down, or my dad complained his car needed repairs. Not once did they ask if I could manage. They only said Olivia's having a hard time after changing jobs. If you can help, that would be great. And I helped quietly, as if it were my unspoken duty. I kept telling myself I did it out of love, out of responsibility. But deep down I hoped for just one thank you. Just once. That moment never came. On the rare afternoons, I sat alone on my balcony, looking down at the quiet street below. I'd wonder if one day I stopped paying those bills, would they even notice my absence? Or would they just find someone else to fill the convenient gap I left behind for Olivia? Everything always came easily. She only had to walk into a party, smile at the right moment, tell a few engaging stories, and she'd have the whole room's attention. Me, all I had were my work spreadsheets, health projects, and endless meetings. No one in my family had ever truly seen the value in what I did. I had grown used to being the faint shadow behind the bright stage where Olivia stood. That April, my company had just completed a successful funding round with a healthcare investment firm in New York. After 3 intense months, the pressure finally lifted, and I decided to reward myself with a few days off. I had planned to fly home early to help my parents prepare for my mother's 60th birthday, just as I had done every year. The thought of her opening the door, smiling, as she saw me carrying a basket of gifts and pastries, warmed me inside. That afternoon, as I was wrapping up the last paperwork at the office before my break, my phone rang. My father's name appeared on the screen. I picked up, cheerful. "I'll be home tomorrow morning." "Do you need me to pick up anything, Dad?" On the other end, he was silent for a few seconds, then cleared his throat. "Stella, if possible, don't come home this year." I froze for a moment, thinking he was worried I was too busy. "I've already arranged everything. It won't affect my work." His voice hardened, each word dropping like a stone. "Olivia is bringing her new boyfriend. He's a chief financial officer, articulate, very successful. Your job is hard to explain to outsiders. Your presence would invite comparisons and ruin the atmosphere. It's best you stay in San Diego." I gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. "So you mean I would embarrass the family just because I'm not the kind of person you want to introduce to Olivia's boyfriend?" He didn't deny it. In fact, his next words were as cold as a knife's edge. "If you insist on coming, then don't call me your father." I heard the sharp click of the line disconnecting, leaving a heavy silence in my quiet room. The cappuccino on my desk had gone cold, but my hands were still trembling, not from anger, but from something deeper, the feeling of being shut out from the family I had tried so hard to hold together. I sat by the window, golden sunset light spilling into the room, yet unable to warm the chill in my chest. For years I had told myself that, even if I wasn't loved like Olivia, at least I was still their daughter. But with that single sentence, everything shattered. I stood up, walked straight to my desk, opened my laptop, and logged into my banking app. For over 2 years, I had been transferring money to my parents every month, electricity, water, internet cable, totaling nearly $4,800. That didn't include the extras: a broken fridge, car repairs, a leaky roof. Not once did they ask if I could manage. They simply assumed I would cover it. I opened the scheduled payments list and saw the long column of recurring bills, each one under my name, as if I were their personal treasurer. I hovered over each one and clicked cancel. Electricity canceled. Water canceled. Internet canceled. No warning, just a simple message: cancellation successful. Leaning back in my chair, I closed my eyes. There was no sense of victory, only a quiet emptiness. But I knew that from this moment everything had changed. That night, I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard his voice again. "If you insist on coming, then don't call me your father." It wasn't an impulsive remark. It was a sentence that stripped me of my place in the family. The next morning, instead of packing my suitcase, I brewed a pot of mint tea, opened my laptop, and began working on the company's quarterly report. Outside, the San Diego sky was a deep blue, the breeze carrying the salty scent of the ocean. I told myself that if they could cut me out over a single gathering, I could cut the last tie that bound me, the payments they treated as my obligation. That evening, my phone buzzed. A message from my mother, Stella. "It looks like the power and internet are out at the house. Can you check for us right after?" Came one from my father. "No water. Call the provider now. Guests are coming." I looked at the screen, then placed the phone face down on the table. No inquiry about how I was, no apology, just orders as always. An hour later, Olivia's message appeared: "Internet's down, guests are arriving, and Mom's about to cry." "What's going on?" I typed a response, then deleted it. "Dad told me if I came home not to call him Dad." "I'm just doing exactly what he asked." I didn't send it because I knew they would only hear what they wanted to hear. Closing my laptop, I leaned back in my chair. My apartment was so quiet, I could hear the ticking of the clock. No accusations, no comparisons, no unreasonable demands. For the first time, I felt relief. On the morning of my mother's birthday, the San Diego sky was covered in a thin layer of clouds, the pale light hinting at something to come. I sat by the window, holding a hot cappuccino, watching the mist slowly lift from the street. My phone rang, my mother's name on the screen. "Stella, the power's out at the house. Today's important. Can you take care of it?" Her voice was gentle, as if our conversation from a few days ago had never happened. I set the phone down without answering. Less than 10 minutes later, another message appeared from my father: "No power, no water. Call the provider now. Guests are arriving." I exhaled quietly. Cold words, no inquiry, no concern about the fact I'd been shut out of the very party they were preparing. Then Olivia's turn, a long message full of exclamation points. "Internet's cut, guests will be here in an hour, Mom's about to cry." "What did you do?" I stared at the screen as the messages kept flooding in, like a wave: demands, orders, accusations. No one mentioned why I wasn't there. No one brought up my father's words that had pushed me out of that house. By late morning, the phone rang again. This time, it was from someone I least expected: Aunt Mary, my father's older sister, who rarely got involved in family drama, but always kept a calm demeanor. I hesitated, then picked up. Her face appeared on the screen, dimly lit by a phone flashlight, deep lines visible on her skin. "Stella," she said softly, "the house is in chaos. Guests are here, but there's no power, no water, no internet. Everyone's running around and your mom is panicking. Can you explain what's going on?" I stayed silent for a few seconds, then answered slowly, Aunt. What do you think I should do after hearing my own father say that if I came home, I shouldn't call him my father? Aunt Mary froze. Behind her, the noise was unmistakable. Olivia urging someone to make a call, my father barking orders. My mother's voice raised higher than usual, she's just sulking. No one would be heartless enough to do this today. I smiled faintly without joy. Suddenly, another face appeared beside my aunt, a man in a neatly pressed suit, brown hair combed into place. He looked at me for a few seconds, eyes widening in recognition. Stella? He asked, voice lowered. I recognized him instantly. Daniel, Olivia's new boyfriend, the very reason I had been excluded to avoid comparisons. Hello, Daniel, I replied calmly. He glanced over his shoulder, then back at me. Wait, you're Stella Carter, co-founder of HelixMed. A long pause settled over my parents' living room, long enough for me to hear the faint clink of cutlery. Olivia stood in the background, her expression stiff. My parents looked as if they'd swallowed stones. Daniel glanced around the room, then spoke clearly, for all to hear. She's my direct boss. I'll be starting at the San Diego branch next week, reporting directly to her. No one said a word. I offered a small smile. I hope your introduction today goes well. Then, I ended the call. The living room fell silent. My phone kept buzzing with incoming messages. Olivia accusing me of ruining the party, my mother pleading for me to help, just this once, my father ordering me to restore all the services immediately. I set the phone down, picked up my now cold cappuccino, and took a slow sip. There was no satisfaction, no triumph, just a light, weightless emptiness, like setting down a burden I'd carried for too long. Outside, the ocean remained a vivid blue, the waves breaking steadily. Inside my apartment, everything was neat and quiet. I knew the chaos in that house, hundreds of miles away, would rage on until the party ended. But it was no longer my concern, and strangely, for the first time in years, I felt truly free. 3 days after that chaotic birthday, I sat in my office at HelixMed reviewing the list of employees scheduled to transfer between branches. It was the kind of routine work I did at the start of every month. Nothing remarkable until my eyes stopped on a name. Daniel Whitmore. My heart skipped a beat. I remembered that last name clearly because just a few days earlier my mother had mentioned it in a short, quickly interrupted conversation. Olivia's new boyfriend, Daniel, works in finance, very successful. I moved my cursor to the right and opened the detailed profile. Position Chief Financial Officer of the Chicago branch, set to transfer to San Diego to oversee healthcare investment projects. Approval required by Stella Carter. Leaning back in my chair, the corner of my mouth curved ever so slightly, not out of gloating, but because life really does have a way of looping back around without you lifting a finger. My family had excluded me from the party just to avoid comparisons in front of him, and now I was the one he'd be reporting directly to. I didn't rush to approve it. I simply marked it as viewed and closed my laptop. Some things are best left to unfold on their own. On Daniel's first day at HelixMed, I went about my work as usual. The office buzzed more than normal as HR welcomed a batch of transfers from other branches. Around 10 a.m., my office door opened. Daniel walked in holding a folder, carrying the polite but slightly stiff demeanor of someone new to the environment. His eyes swept over my desk and landed on me. In a single second, the composure on his face dissolved. His eyes widened, then paused as if the pieces had just clicked together. Stella, he almost blurted out. I looked up, my tone even and light. Welcome to HelixMed. I'll be reviewing your financial plan for this quarter. Please have a seat. In that moment, I could see his discomfort clearly. Daniel glanced toward the hallway, then back at me, as though needing to confirm that I was indeed the person he'd seen on Aunt Mary's phone screen just days ago. I slid a contract toward him, tapping the section that required his signature. We'll have a meeting this afternoon to go over the budget in detail. I look forward to good cooperation. He signed quickly, though his eyes never left me. I said nothing more, asked nothing personal. In work, everything must be kept clear. Daniel stood, giving a slight nod. Thank you, boss. I caught a few glances from the hallway colleagues passing by, clearly surprised to hear a newly transferred CFO call me that. I didn't explain. I didn't need to. When the door closed, I sat still for a few seconds. Not happy, not smug, just a quiet sense that the wheel of fate had completed a full turn, restoring me to a place they once denied me. At lunch, heading to the company cafeteria, I happened to see Daniel standing with a group of new managers. They were laughing and chatting, but I noticed he glanced at me now and then, his expression a mix of awkwardness and something that resembled respect. I didn't initiate conversation. If anything needed to be said, the moment would come on its own, and I knew the time when Olivia learned her boyfriend was working under me was not far away. Walking back to my office, I thought to myself, perhaps I don't need to try to get back at anyone at all. The truth revealed at the right time is far more powerful than any rebuttal. And this time I would let them face it on their own. That afternoon I was sitting in my office at HelixMed when my phone buzzed non-stop. The caller was Aunt Mary. Normally she only reached out during Thanksgiving or Christmas, so I was a bit surprised. I answered and her face appeared on the screen lit by a dim lamp. Behind her I could clearly hear the noise of people moving around, voices overlapping, and my mother's tone louder than usual. "Stella," Aunt Mary whispered, "the house is in chaos. Your mom is panicking. Guests are waiting with no electricity, no water, no internet. Everyone wants you to explain." I leaned back in my chair, keeping my voice even. "What do you think I should do when my own father told me if I came back not to call him Dad anymore?" Aunt Mary froze. At that moment, Olivia's voice came from the background. "She's just sulking. No one would be heartless enough to do that today." I pressed my lips together, letting out a faint laugh, with no joy in it. Suddenly, someone appeared behind Aunt Mary, stepping closer to the camera. Brown hair, neatly combed, a tailored suit. Daniel. His eyes met mine first with surprise, then recognition. "Stella?" he asked, voice slightly hoarse. "Hello, Daniel," I replied, my eyes fixed on the screen. He turned to glance at the others, then back at me. His voice was clear, loud enough for everyone in the room to hear. "She's Stella Carter, my direct boss at HelixMed." The space behind Aunt Mary fell silent. My mother froze, Olivia's eyes widened, my father clenched his jaw. A few guests whispered. I simply said, "Hope today's event goes smoothly." Then I hung up. I sat there for a moment, the light from my laptop casting across my desk. There was no gloating, no sense of revenge, only a deep, steady quiet. For the first time, the truth had been laid bare without me saying a word. Minutes later, my phone buzzed again. The first text was from Olivia. "You knew all along, didn't you? You let this happen right in the middle of the party." Mom cried the whole time. Daniel was uncomfortable. "You're cruel." I set the phone down, brewed some ginger tea, and let the warmth spread through my hands. When the tea cooled, I replied, "You call me cruel, but I was just sitting in my office. I didn't make the call. I didn't introduce myself." If one truth was enough to ruin the whole event, maybe it was never built on a solid foundation. I hit send, not waiting for a reply. Half an hour later, a message from Mom came in. "Never thought you'd choose this way to get back at the family." I leaned back, closing my eyes. Get back at them? No. I simply let things unfold as they truly were. When night fell, my apartment stayed peaceful. In that silence, I knew I had just closed an old door, not with anger, but by letting the truth speak for itself in place of all the years I had been dismissed and disregarded. The next morning, as soon as I turned on my computer at the office, I saw my inbox flooded with emails. The most prominent was a string from Olivia, long, frantic, littered with exclamation marks. "You knew from the start, didn't you? You let everything happen in front of everyone." Mom was humiliated. I was humiliated. Daniel was put in an awkward spot. "You didn't think about anyone's feelings. You're selfish and cruel." I leaned back in my chair, read through it all, but didn't rush to respond. I didn't feel angry, nor did I feel the need to explain. Only after making my coffee did I type word by word, "You say I'm cruel, but I was just sitting in my office." I didn't make the video call, didn't introduce myself, Didn't try to make anyone uncomfortable. If one truth is enough to bring everything down, then maybe it was never solid to begin with. I hit send, then went back to work. By late morning, a new email appeared in my personal inbox, subject line apology. Sender Daniel Whitmore. Stella, I don't know where to start. After what happened, I realize I've been blind. I used to think Olivia was thoughtful, but last night I saw the difference between how she treats people and how she talks about them. I can't stay in a relationship where basic respect doesn't exist. Today I ended things with Olivia. I also want to apologize for not recognizing your position and value sooner. I truly respect how you handled everything, silent but straightforward. I read it twice, then replied simply, thank you. I don't mix family matters with work. I hope we can still collaborate well. In the afternoon, while reviewing financial reports, my phone buzzed. It was Olivia. I ignored the first call, but when the second and third came back to back, I picked up. Her voice was urgent, nothing like her usual confidence. Can you talk to Daniel for me? He misunderstood me. If you say a few words, he might reconsider. I paused for a few seconds, then answered. Daniel didn't leave because of anything I said. He left because of what he saw in you. The line went quiet except for her breathing. Then Olivia spoke softly, almost swallowing her words. I don't want to lose him. I'll change. Please just help me this one time. I looked out the window at the trees swaying lightly in the company courtyard. Olivia, I once waited for a message from you when I was struggling, a word of concern when I failed. But it never came. Now you call me only to save a relationship you ruined yourself. I won't intervene. She started to say something else, but I ended the call. That evening, as I stepped out of the building, the sunset bathed the street in a warm orange glow. A strange lightness settled in my chest. Not because Daniel left Olivia, nor because of his apology, but because for the first time I had drawn a clear boundary and didn't step back even when facing someone with my own blood. Olivia would have to face the consequences of her own behavior. As for me, I just needed to keep living and working on my own terms. 1 week later, on a quiet Sunday afternoon, my apartment doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, so at first I thought about ignoring it. But when I glanced through the peephole, I saw my parents standing outside. Mom wore a beige sweater holding a small paper bag. Dad had his arms crossed, his expression not as sharp as during our last phone call, but not warm either. I opened the door, stepping aside to let them in. No hugs, no lengthy greetings, just a heavy silence from the door to the living room. I poured 2 glasses of water, set them on the table, and sat across from them. Dad spoke first, his voice low, but trying to sound gentle. About what happened on your mom's birthday, I might gone too far. Maybe we should put it aside and talk like a family. I stayed quiet, just nodding slightly. I knew he hadn't reached the real reason yet. And right on cue, Mom chimed in, pulling a stack of printed papers from her bag. Your dad and I talked it over. Now that you're stable and doing well at work, if possible, we'd like you to help us with about $2,000 a month. Just to cover living expenses, insurance, and a bit for retirement savings. I looked at Dad. He quickly added, with your income, this isn't much. We're family, Stella. I sat up straighter, keeping my tone calm. What about Olivia? Mom hesitated. She just broke up, she's not in a good place mentally, and her job isn't going well. We can't put pressure on her right now. I gave a small laugh, not out of mockery, but because it all circled back to the same pattern. Olivia was always untouchable, while I was the one expected to carry the load. If Olivia agrees to contribute her share, $1,000 a month, and we sign a clear contract stating that when you both pass, all assets, including the house, will go to me, then I'll consider it. The air in the room tightened. Dad frowned, his voice rising. Are you serious? You're setting conditions for your own parents? I answered directly. It's not a condition, it's a principle. For more than 2 years, I've been paying nearly $5,000 a month for this family, not counting extra expenses, and I've never once heard acknowledgement or thanks. If you want me to keep going, everything needs to be transparent. Mom turned to Dad, her voice softer. Maybe we should think about, but Dad slammed his hand on the table, making the water glasses tremble. We raised you for over 20 years, and now when we need a little help, you want a contract. How ungrateful." I didn't stand, just met his eyes. "If you see raising me as an investment, we can sit down and calculate every dollar every year. But I won't pay it back by staying silent and letting things stay unfair." Dad pressed his lips together, saying nothing more. Mom rose, placing her hand on his arm. "Let's go." I walked them to the door. No hugs, no promises. When it closed behind them, leaving only the sound of wind slipping through the window gap, I knew another chapter had ended. No arguments, no further explanations needed. From that day, they never reached out again. No texts, no calls, no apologies. Just silence, the kind I'd long been used to, but this time it felt lighter than ever. Because I knew I had set my boundaries, and I wouldn't go back to where I started. Since that meeting, my phone has stayed silent. No accusatory texts, no drawn-out calls, no half-hearted attempts to mend things. That silence, once suffocating, now feels like a fresh breeze, opening the space I'd longed for. My morning slipped back into rhythm, up at 6 a.m., a run along the shoreline, a hot cappuccino, then a walk to the Helix Med office. Work was still demanding, but no longer interrupted by urgent transfer requests or emergency calls in the middle of meetings. For the first time in years, I was living for myself, not for someone else's demands or expectations. Daniel still worked under me. True to his email, he respected the line between business and personal life. We never mentioned Olivia, and I valued that. At Helix Med, he was a dependable colleague. Beyond that, we were simply two separate people, bound only by what we chose. Sometimes I met Aunt Mary at a little cafe near my office. She never asked directly about the party, but her eyes told me she understood more than she said. Once she laid her hand on the table and spoke softly. "You know, sometimes silence isn't giving up. It's how you keep yourself whole." I nodded. I'd spent too long as my family's rescuer, the one they called when a bill was due, the fridge broke, the internet failed, or Olivia was too busy for anything except asking if I was okay. Now I'd learned to step out of that role without guilt and say no. Old habits faded, no more marking Olivia's birthday on my calendar, no holiday gifts, no family photo as my phone wallpaper. Those empty spaces filled with weekend getaways, quiet nights reading by the window, or simply letting the sea breeze drift into my apartment. One Friday, leaving the office, I wandered into a bookstore. On the shelf, I spotted a small wooden sign etched with "Home is not always a place. Sometimes it's a choice." I bought it and hung it by my front door. Every time I passed, it reminded me family isn't always blood. True family is where you're respected, seen as whole, not a wallet, not a default problem solver. I know some people will never agree with my choice. To them, refusing to give your parents financial support is ungrateful. But if they'd been in my place, they'd understand love can't be enforced by monthly payments, family bonds can't survive without respect. I no longer seek their approval. I don't need their apology. I just need my boundaries to stay in place, and I've learned to protect them. One early autumn morning, sunlight streamed through my living room window. I sat at the table, opened my laptop for a meeting with new investors. The sound of waves blended with the smell of fresh coffee, and I realized peace doesn't come from others changing. It comes from choosing to live differently. I'm no longer the Stella who sat by the phone, waiting for a check-in from family. I'm the Stella who asks, "Am I okay?" and answers yes, because I'm living my own life. Stella's story is a powerful reminder that real family is built not just on blood, but on respect and understanding. Once the quiet provider, treated as the default source of money, Stella dared to set boundaries, say no to unconditional demands, and step out of the role forced upon her. In reality, many still endure for fear of being seen as ungrateful. But as Stella has shown, loving yourself and protecting your worth isn't selfish, it's the first step to finding peace and living true to yourself. What do you think of Stella's choice? Was she too harsh or simply protecting her right to be respected? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt family stories.